Hello everyone. It's time to put my winter wheels on the Subarus, but this year I have 4 new Autel TPMS sensors to install and a set of rims I picked up for my winter wheels. So the first thing I have to do is scan the TPMS sensor codes in my summer wheels into my Autel TS501 TPMS service tool. That way, when it comes time to program the codes into the new Autel MX sensors, the service tool will have the necessary IDs available to program into them. I'm going to match the IDs for the new winter sensors to the existing IDs in the summer sensors. So I'll end up with 2 sets of wheels with the same IDs. Then I won't need to reprogram the TPMS system to accept wheels with different ID codes every time I change from summer to winter wheels or back again. To learn how to scan the sensors on the car, check out my video titled Autel MaxiTPMS TS501 used on a Subaru Outback. I ordered 4 of these programmable universal TPMS sensors from Autel. They're the MX sensor. These sensors can work with 315 MHz and 433 MHz systems. The frequency they operate at is determined by the programmer. So when the programmer sends the program down to the sensor, it tells it what frequency to use. They cover 99% of vehicles. They were individually wrapped in a plastic bag, but I took them out and I wrote on each one just to keep them separate. Like this one here is front right, FR. This one here is rear left, RL. FL, front left. And RR, guess what that is? This is the No button. This is the Yes button. Move cursor up. Move cursor down. Move cursor left. Move cursor right. Scan. And this is the power button. So I started by scanning the TPMS sensors on the car into the programmer. And I wrote down all the sensor IDs, and I'll show you where to find those in the programmer. So you start this up by holding the power button for 3 seconds and then releasing, and it boots up. So it comes up to this menu with 6 options, and you can move the cursor left and right with the left arrow and right arrow, and up and down with the up arrow and down arrow. And I'm going to select the latest test and hit yes. And that comes up and shows me the data for the last scan. The red X is there because when I programmed the front right sensor, I immediately went and tried to scan it to read data from it. And these things need to have pressure on them. So it has to be installed in the tire, and it has to have more than 10 psi in the tire before you can scan the tire pressure. So it came up with a red X. That's an error, but that's okay. So if I want to know what all the IDs are, you can see in the bottom right here it says Y equals all IDs. So just hit Y, and it shows you the data there. The sensor IDs are listed. And I wrote them all down before it failed, fortunately. So again, on this screen, as long as one of the tires is selected, if you just hit Y for all IDs, it'll bring up all the IDs. Before we program the new sensor IDs, I should point out that these Autel TPMS tools will only program Autel MX sensors. They can read other brands of sensors, like Schrader for instance, and they can relearn other brand sensor ID codes into the car's OBD controller, but they can't program other brands of sensor IDs. So something that's important to note is that the sensor IDs that are already scanned in here, those are the IDs that are going to be programmed into the new sensors, because I'm just copying the ones that are on the car into the new ones. And you do that by coming over here to the sensor icon. I have this one on the bottom right selected. It says MX sensor. Select yes. And this shows you 4 options: front left, front right, rear left. And you can see the front left has the X on it there. So I'm going to be working first with the front right. So now I have front right selected. I'm just going to hit yes. And you get 4 options here. The first option is copy by activation. And that's the one we're going to use. So yes. And it's communicating with the sensor. And now it's programming the sensor. The programming succeeded and it's testing. And the sensor ID on the screen is ACB CD5. And that matches what I had written down for front right, ACB CD5. So that one's programmed. Now I'll move on to the next one, which is right rear. Okay, so here's the right rear sensor. I have right rear selected, hit yes. Copy by activation, yes. Programming success. Testing the sensor. It read ACB 299 out of the sensor. And that's what I wrote down for the right rear, ACB 299. So we're okay on that one. Next is the rear left sensor. I have the rear left sensor selected, hit yes. Copy by activation, yes. It's programming the sensor. Now it's testing the sensor. And it's reading back ACB 418. My rear left sensor is ACB 418. So that's good. So those 3 are all set, but what about the front left? Let's have a look at that next. So here's my front left sensor. Now remember, this is the one that has the X next to it because there was an error with it when I tried to scan it. So select front left. This time I can't do copy by activation because the programmer doesn't know the ID. So I'm going to come down here, option 4, manual create. Yes. And here you can manually input the sensor ID, which I wrote down earlier. Now notice here the Y button says finish. It doesn't say enter. So how do we enter the IDs? Well, first let's scroll over to A, that's the first letter in the code, and hit finish. Nope, input can't be null. Back, A is still selected, hit scan, and that puts the A in the ID box there on the screen. So next in the code is C. use the right left arrow and the up down arrow to select C, scan, and then B. Scan, and now I have three numbers, 583. 5, 8, whoops, 3. ACB 583. Do you want to save and continue? Yes. So now the programmer is scanning that code into the sensor. And it's testing the sensor, so it's actually reading the sensor, and it came back with the ID ACB 583. So now we know that one's okay. So I have 4 brand new sensors that have the code programmed into them, and they're ready to install on the car. So I'm going to put some bead sealant on the inside of this hole. This is the hole for the tire valve stem. And in this case it's a TPMS valve stem. With a nice juicy coat of bead sealant. And then I'm going to put some on the valve stem itself around the base. A nice juicy coat. Now it's important to install it so that these 2 pins are aligned in the direction of rotation. That way when you clip the TPMS sensor onto that, it will work properly. It will fit properly. Okay. Of course I got a little on the threads here. You certainly don't want to get it inside the valve. That'll screw things up. This is a valve stem installer. It threads onto the Schrader valve stem threads there. And you use it just to pry the valve in. Make sure it's aligned properly. Pry it in till it seats. Okay, that's all the way in. So this is my TPMS sensor. I marked front left, and it just snaps on. Get some on the bottom there. This is the inside of the tire, the inside part of the rim. And then the valve stem itself. Now remember, I'm installing it so that there's these 2 pins on either side of this valve stem will be oriented in alignment with the rotation of the tire. Okay, that's it.
It's important to get that lined up properly with those pins being lined up with the direction of rotation, because once that stuff sets up, you really can't move it. I marked its location, front right. That's the same as the mark on the sensor I put on there earlier. This is bead sealant. Want to make sure those pins are oriented in the direction of rotation. I'm going to use a piece of cardboard this time to protect the rim. I noticed that I'm marking it up a little bit by putting pressure on it. I'm just using this thing to pry the valve up and into the hole. You want to pry it gently but firmly, and don't go nuts with it. You don't want to damage it. Okay, so my rear left sensor, just orient it this way and it just snaps onto the stem there, and that's it. If you want to remove it, you hit that little button there. It says press right on it. Press that in and pull. It comes right out. Okay, so I'll give you a different perspective. I'm putting the bead sealant on the outside of the rim stem seal, and now I'll just, the hole's right here. So I'm going to put some here. Let's put it around there. I think it's fine to be generous with it. And then of course I want to put some on my valve stem itself around the base here. Orient the two pins in the direction of travel. The direction of rotation. Oops, don't want that on there. Put that up in there. Gently pry it up into the hole. And basically the base of that valve stem is getting squeezed into the hole, like so. Valve cap on there. And this is my rear right wheel, so I'm putting the rear right TPMS sensor on there. It just clicks on and that's it. Okay, just to show you from a different perspective, this is the sensor. The valve stem is here, and this shining piece of metal here says press on it. That's a release. If you press that in and pull on the sensor, it comes right off. And those two pins are here oriented in this direction, so that when this gets snapped back in, It doesn't interfere with anything. It's lined up properly and it's ready to go. So that was the front right. And the next one on the list is rear right. So here's my rear right sensor, and I'm going to put it in here, and something's not going to work. I'm doing this on purpose to show you. Select rear right, copy by activation, yes, and it's scanning. But look at that, there was an error. 2 sensors detected. Make sure there is only 1 sensor nearby. So in other words, it's reading both of these sensors because they're both close to it. And actually, this one over here and this one over here, I brought them all over, are all close to it. So it doesn't know which sensor to work with. So they actually tell you to keep the other sensors 4 feet away. Okay, press any key to continue. And again, I'm working on the right rear, or as they say, the rear right. And copy by activation, yes. It's programming a sensor that's within 4 inches. And programming success. Test sensor, please wait. So it tests it. It actually reads the ID out of it. ACB299. After the tires were mounted and balanced, I put them on the car. The TPMS system worked without a hiccup. It was a seamless transition from summer wheels to winter wheels. The only question now is how long the new sensors will last. Thank you for watching. Please take a moment to like and subscribe.